So in our first video we saved some seed, and in the second video we're going to sow some of the seed that we saved. So we're going to sow some calendula seed, we're going to sow some wallflower, and we're going to sow some drumstick primulas. So just to explain first of all about the different type of ways plants grow. We have annuals. So these are our calendulas, our cosmos, our sunflowers. So they're annual. These will grow, they flower, they set seed all in 1 year. That's their life cycle. Then we have biennials. So they will do the same thing but in 2 years. So foxgloves, wallflowers, they're in the biennial family. Generally for the first year they produce lots of leaf and they bulk themselves up, and then in the second year they flower and they self-seed. So they're often treated like annuals because you need to sow them every year if you want to have them in your garden. And parsley is actually in this family too. People often think that they've killed their parsley, but it's biennial. So the third group are perennials, and that's mostly what I have in my own garden. So you can grow these from seed. They might take 1 or 2 years to flower, but then you have them every year. They grow, they flower, they produce seed, and they die back, and then they come back every year from their own rootstock. So we're going to sow some calendula first. Now it's a little late in the season for sowing calendula seed. You'd usually do these maybe in April, May, June, but we'll sow some anyway. We're not too late. So this is the seed that we saved, the tiny little brown ones. There's little bits of husk in here. We don't want that. It's the little curly seeds that we're going to save. So I'm going to get some compost. I usually sieve my compost to break up any lumps. Pour it in here. So this is all we're doing, is taking out the lumpy parts, because it will make it difficult for the seed to push up unless the compost on top of it is nice and light. If there are little hard lumpy bits left, I tend to just put them into the pot so as not to waste them, or I put them on the beds. I don't throw it out. The compost that I use is this. Klausman is the name of it. I have always used this for growing my vegetable seeds, and it's great quality compost. So this is potting compost, and the purpose of this really is to hold on to water. The seed will have all the nutrient inside itself that is needed for it to grow, and grow for a little while. Like sunflower seeds and pumpkin seeds, they're good for us because they're full of nutrient. So what the compost does is hold on to water. So for that reason, with your compost, you need to keep it in the shed, not outside where it will get wet and dry out, because then it loses its ability to hold on to water. And also don't reuse compost, because once it's been wet and dry a few times, it tends to not be as good at holding on to water. So we're going to take these 9cm pots. These are great for calendula, and we're going to just fill it up with compost. Okay, I'm going to fill it to the top. I didn't push it down, you'll see, and now I'm going to give it a little tap. This takes out any air. So I don't want it filled right the way to the top. I want to leave a little gap. I might even a little bit too much there. You don't want it down really deep, and you don't want it filled to the top. I'm going to make a tiny little space where I'm going to put 4 seeds in here. So this will be for 4 calendula plants. The most common mistake people make when they're sowing seed is that they push the seed right down. The seed is quite small, this seed. So really you just want to put it down a little bit into the compost. So it will depend on the size of the seed. If you have a very big seed, it can go a little deeper, but usually it doesn't want to be more than 3 times its own depth. So you can see that there. And now I'm just going to cover them lightly. And that is it. Push it down, and of course we label it. So I tend to keep lollipop sticks, or I recycle these plastic butter tubs. My mom saves them for me. So I'm going to write calendula and today's date, July. And we stick it in the side so that we don't disturb the seed. Give it a little tap down, and then of course I need to water it. Okay, so I'm going to move it over here just to show you. I have my watering can. I'm going to put it on the bed, and there is rainwater. You really do give it a good soak. I save rainwater because the plants prefer it. There's no lime in it and there's no chemicals in it. But if you only have tap water, that's fine too. I tend to fill my watering cans and leave the water in them so that it's not freezing cold. And actually, I could probably even do a little bit more. I want it to be really soaked, especially the first time. And then I can put this at this time of year outside If it was April, I would keep it in the polytunnel for a little bit of extra heat. Or if there were heavy showers forecast, it can be good to keep them inside as well. And these should germinate really quickly. In about 3 or 4 days, these will have sprouted. Okay? So that's our calendula sown. That will produce 4 plants, not just one, because we put 4 seeds in if they all germinate. Now, another way to sow, and this would be great for the tidy town groups, is in a tray like this. Because obviously if you have lots of these little tray pots hanging around the place, it's a lot more work moving them in and out. Whereas on this tray here, I can sow lots of seed and keep them in it until they get big. What I'm going to sow in these are our wallflowers. This is the seed that I saved. So these are the biennial seed. So these will grow up a little bit this year, and that's all I'm going to do. You can see I'm opening it up and I'm letting them just fall onto the compost. So lots of little wallflower plants are going to grow in this one tray. We could easily have 100. Now, I can't leave them in it until they're big plants, but for the first while, they can stay in this. So wallflower seed, you can see it's much smaller than calendula. It's tiny, and they actually need a little bit of light to germinate. So I'm not going to even cover these with compost. All I'm going to do is water. I'll put a few more in. What I could have done, and might have been a good idea, is water the tray first, because when I water the seed it will dislodge it slightly, which can be not a good idea. But there is another method. If you have forgotten to water beforehand, instead of watering with a watering can, and you can see there's some on each side, we'll get them both out. Now there's a good bit of seed there. You could even put in a little bit more, but that will do for the demonstration. You could sit them into a tray which has some water in it here instead, and it will suck up the water itself, and that won't dislodge the seed. So the only thing I forgot to do there was put the label on. So I'm just going to write a label quickly. So it's wallflowers and the date. Again, these can go outside at this time of year, or if you have a glass house or a polytunnel, you can keep them inside. Just gives them a bit of a protected environment. And there's our label. Now, finally, we're going to sow some of these candalabra primulas, and I only got this seed yesterday from somewhere that I visited. So this is like our primrose or our cowslip. It's the same family. And the unusual thing about this seed is that it's sown fresh, which means you collect the seed, you don't dry it out, and you sow it fresh, and you get a bit of a head start on the growing season. So I'm going to sow these into a modular tray just to show you the different ways there are to sow. These are really handy, especially for plants like calendula or cosmos, ones that are regularly, they will all germinate, they tend to germinate, because each one has its own little pot. So in this tray I've got kind of 40 little plants very easily. Or these are the ones bedding plants usually come in. So if you sow them in these, then you can go straight from here into the ground without having to pot them on. So if we open up this seed, I don't know if you can see that now, we've got tiny, tiny little green seed here. You see it on my nail. Now each one of these can produce a primula. I'm going to put a few in, and if they all germinate, I will reduce it down to just one. There's a few in that one. And again, this seed needs light to germinate. It's actually very easy to do. That's a little bit too much now. I'm going to move some of that into this one. It's very easy to break the seed up, and you can see that it's green. It's very easy to spot it. So I would fill this whole tray with some of these primulas. And these will be ready for planting out probably next spring. And again though, I will put these outside. So I would continue filling that whole tray, and then I will have lots of plants ready to be planted out. So just to show you the calendulas, a couple of weeks ago, my daughter, it was on the 26th of June, she sowed these. She went round the garden and she collected, you can actually see the calendula seed here, it's still attached to the leaf, and she put them into a pot herself. She's 6, did it all herself. I just gave her the label, and they have all germinated. So that's how easy it is. She did the same thing herself with sunflowers this year, and it really made me see that this is something that we can all do, and just to give it a go and try and grow some stuff from seed. To recap, so we took our seed, we have our compost that we sieved to make it easy for the plant to be able to push up through. We filled our pots, we tapped it down to let the compost settle. We didn't stick the seed in really deep, which is the common mistake people made. Covered it lightly in the case of calendula. We don't cover our primulas. We didn't cover our wallflowers because the seed is tiny. And then we water them and label them.